Titans general manager Mike Borgonzi will rebuild this team into a contender if we just trust the process. Borgonzi spoke to Titans media on Wednesday, including why he traded Roger McCreary, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Draymond Jones, why Jeffery Simmons wasn't traded, a little on Chad Brinker, the rookie class, and the coaching search. We're going to react to everything he said now. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it.
The results aren't good enough right now. And we understand that. And we understand the frustration, with the fan base. And we know that we have to earn back the trust of this fan base.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo. Justin, that was Mike Borgonzi. That was part of his very long opening remarks before he opened up the presser to questions, talking about earning back the trust of the fan base, and that is why I said we all need to trust the process. How's it going, Justin?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well because I quite enjoyed that Mike Borgonzi press conference on Wednesday afternoon. In fact, we enjoyed it so much that we called an Audible, a Music City Audible, and decided to run this Mike Borgonzi reaction episode today. If you tuned in the last couple of days, and I know you did because you love this podcast, we had told you that we were going to be doing a winning and losing episode today. Should you be rooting for the Titans to get the number one pick? Should you be rooting for them to win games the rest of the way? Fear not. That has been pushed to Monday. We are going to make that Monday's podcast. We don't have a game to react to on Monday with the Titans being on a bye week Sunday. So plenty of time to get that content. It will come your way Monday. But today, I thought it was really important after that Mike Borgonzi presser that we had to focus this episode on what was said. Because in my opinion, it's probably one of the best Titans pressers we've had in a while.
Yeah, I think that presser instilled a lot of confidence for me in Mike Borgonzi and a lot of this fan base. Like, I've been harping on this for a little while now because it frustrates me how much of the fan base is just out on Chad Brinker for seemingly no reason, as if Brinker has been like puppet master shadow behind the scenes, tanking the making all these bad decisions for the Titans team and then hiding behind other people and saying, oh, I get to keep my job. Like, that's how Titans fans feel about Chad Brinker. A lot of them feel about Chad Brinker right now. So it's nice to see Borgonzi come to the podium without Brinker, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the first time he's spoken outside of maybe like the Combine in a Nashville setting press conference. Has he done this before without Brinker by his side?
I don't think he's done it without Brinker because, the last time was after they fired Callahan and they were both up there. And that presser, if you remember, got really bad reviews, right? Like, it was not one. They didn't really feel like they wanted to be there. It was probably an Amy Adams Strunk decision to fire Callahan, and then she sends them up there to answer for it. It didn't go well. So, and of course, when he was hired, Brinker would have been there for that presser. So,
post-draft pressers, Brinker's there as well. I'm pretty, correct us in the comments if we're wrong. Sound off in the comments if we're wrong. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel while you're there. If this isn't the first solo Borgonzi presser in Nashville, I want to emphasize in Nashville because I am pretty sure he spoke at the Combine by himself back in February, end of February, early March, whenever the hell the Combine was. But anyway, so yes, Borgonzi, I think, came off really well in this presser. Smart, articulate, firm in his belief. Like, he was, I don't want to say passionate, but like, he wasn't wishy-washy with what he was saying. Like, he didn't mince words. Like, he got his point across, I thought, in a very good way. And part of his opening presser remarks were talking about some of the positive things that he's seen in this team and inside the building. And like, he kept emphasizing that he is seeing growth. Like, there is growth happening here. Just because you haven't seen the results on the field yet doesn't mean the foundation isn't being laid here. And part of that foundation includes the rookie class. And one of the positive growth aspects that he is really harping on is the rookie class. So here is what Mike Borgonzi said about what he's calling a special rookie class.
I want to highlight the rookie class that we have. I think it's a special class. I really do. And not just because I was a GM who picked these players, but I do feel like it's a special class, and it's a class that we can build upon. They represent everything that we want in a Titan. From day one, they stepped in this building. Their work ethic, their passion, their drive to get better, and they are getting better right in front of our eyes. And they're all playing, and they're developing. And that's going to help us through the next 8 games here and into the future.
Well, I'm in full agreement with Mike Borgonzi. I've been really impressed with this rookie class. I think I speak for us both. And we've talked about it consistently, right? Like we have full confidence in Cam Ward as the number 1 overall quarterback. But you look all throughout the class, especially what those 4th-round rookies are doing, all 3 of them being pretty big contributors in the passing game. I still like Kevin Winston, excited to see him come on here, hopefully towards the end of the year as he continues earning more snaps at safety on the defensive side of the ball. The one caveat right now, I guess, is, Femi Oladejo, the 2nd-round pick, who certainly looked raw before suffering a serious lower leg injury. He will be back, I think is the expectation, at some point here during the 2025 season. But and then I'm going to add Marcus Harris to that, because he's starting to play as well, and we'll see if he can continue coming on. But overall, I'm feeling really good about this rookie class, and I have no qualms whatsoever about Mike Borgonzi, calling it special.
Yeah, I'm fully with you. I think it is a special rookie class, and I think part of what we'll get to this answer here in a second on culture and building a culture, but Mike Borgonzi brought in guys that he believes are going to lead not just a talent rebuild, but a culture rebuild. And he went on the OTP Official Titans podcast a little after this presser and talked about Taylor Zarzor asked him his what's your roster building philosophy? And he gave an answer that might be very, very familiar to Titans fans because it's something that John Robinson used to say a lot, which is it's about building the right 53, not just collecting talent. And he went on to say, you have to have talent in this league, obviously, to win, but it's about that mix between talent and character. And, we'll talk about it when we get to Jarvis Brownlee, but you have to have a certain type of culture before you can bring in players that have talent and don't have maybe as good a character, or maybe they need a little more guidance and a little more help along the path. And I think this rookie class lays the foundation for it. We saw it from the very beginning of OTAs when Cam Ward got the guys on the offensive side of the ball to come into meeting rooms. I mean, it starts with Cam Ward. He's your first pick of the draft. He's the first pick of the draft, but he's your first pick of the draft. He plays the most important position, a natural leadership position where whether or not you are a leader, guys are going to look to you to lead, and it's good for the Titans, obviously, that Cam Ward is a natural leader. But him getting those guys in the building at 5 a.m. or 5:30 or whatever time it actually was, super early in the morning to look at film and get ready for OTA practices, and then that carrying over into the season, and that type of character in terms of who you are as a football player, not just what you are, is super important. I think that was a big point of emphasis for this draft class, and I really think Borgonzi nailed it with these picks. And it's crazy to think that they could have as many as 6 starters drafted in one class. Now, that's if some of the guys we haven't seen yet actually hit and pan out or haven't seen as much of yet. But Cam Ward is a starting quarterback, 2 starting receivers, a starting tight end, potentially a starting nickelback in Marcus Harris, and you would hope with a 3rd-round pick that Kevin Winston Jr. is a starting safety. That's 6 guys right there. Doesn't even count Femi Oladejo or Kalel Mullings or Jackson Slater, who, any of those 3 guys could also end up being a starter one day, especially Jackson Slater we're very high on as like a redshirt year becoming a starter. That is a home freaking run draft class. That is so many players that you feel like you can count on in one class. Again, I feel like 4 for sure. As high as 6 or 7 would be wild.
Yeah, the goal, I think every team's goal is to try to get 3 starters out of every draft class. And if the Titans got more than that, and look, I don't know that we're sitting here a year from now and call Alec Iomanner and Chimere Dike starters at wide receiver per se. I don't know that any of these guys besides Cam Ward are going to develop into superstars, like blue chip players.
Agreed.
But if Cam Ward does, I mean, this class is going to be dictated and determined by him mostly. And if a couple of the other guys are starters, if one of those receivers is a starter, I'm confident that Gunnar Helm is going to be a starter. I like Kevin Winston. I think, Slater and Harris both have chances to be starters. Then you'll feel really good. You hit the nail on the head. I think when he calls this class special, it's not just because of what they're producing on the field. It's not because he thinks he has 5 superstars in this class and that we're overrating the Alec Iomanners and the Shimmer DKs. It is the character. It's the willingness to show up into that building at 5 a.m. and watch film with Cam Ward and kind of lead the charge, moving forward, establish sort of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And, college programs talk about this all the time. When they've got a 4th or 5th year senior, well, it's showing the young guys the ropes. Well, guess what? When they've got another rookie class in next year and they see the way that Cam Ward and Alec Iomanner and Gunnar Helm, the way that they work together, that rookie class starts saying, oh crap, this is what's expected of me in this building. That's what the Titans are in the early stages of building. And I think that's why, way beyond the on-field results, which have been promising for the class, but beyond that, that's why Mike Borgonzi feels that this class is special. I would almost guarantee it. He would tell you himself. It's way beyond what they're producing. It's what they're doing.
Yeah, it's that mix of talent and character, and you are 100% right. It's setting a standard for what is expected of you when you enter this building. So a really good answer there from Borgonzi, I think, and a good launching point for that conversation that we're going to have a full episode at some point, Justin. I don't know if this is an in-season thing. This is an off-season topic, but a lot of the topics we've done over the last month or two have been off-season topics because the Titans are so bad on the field that it's just more interesting and more fun to talk about the off-season. But one of those topics is, who are the true foundational building block pieces on this roster that we can count on not just being here next season, which is going to be a big if for a lot of guys, but contributing and helping to turn this thing around, being part of that next season. We'll get into that at some point in the next 2 or 3 months or weeks, depending on how this season continues to unfold. In his opening remarks there, Justin, that I mentioned were very long, Borgonzi also went into detail about why he made the 3 trades that he made, shipping off Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Roger McCreary, and Draymond Jones. I'm going to play his answers. We're going to roll through some answers here now. I'm going to play his answers on McCreary and Draymond Jones, and then he actually talked about Brownlee first, but then he got a follow-up question on Brownlee, so I want to play those 2 answers back to back. So let's start with why Roger McCreary was traded.
The Roger McCreary trade. Roger, love Roger. Teammates loved him. You could tell they loved him. Roger's a good player. It's part of the strategy when you're looking at the roster and evaluating the market in terms of, he's in an expiring contract and what's it going to look like next year. And that's the piece when you draft and develop players too, that you have guys coming in here. It had nothing to do with, because I didn't draft Roger. It has nothing to do with that. We found there was some interest with Roger, and it happened to be the Rams, who had owned our 5th round pick from a prior trade. And so we thought that was good value for us. Where we were at in the draft, we were missing that 5th round pick. So we had a 4th round pick, which was at the beginning of the 4th. And then we had a 6th round pick, which was at the beginning of the 6th. So that's about an 80-spot move if the draft had happened that day. So we thought that was good value, really just getting that pick back, and that's the reason why we did it.
Now, Borgonzi reveals more information than he actually says if you're paying close attention here. He's talking about value. He's talking about you got to look for to next year. He's telling us that they don't see signing a nickel cornerback for $8 to $12 million a year, or maybe his Spot Track projection is actually higher than that. I think it's like $14 million a year on Spot Track for what kind of contract he's going to command next offseason. Like, he's telling us with this answer that they weren't planning to spend that kind of allocate those resources on that position at this stage of the rebuild. It's everything you and I speculated on, Justin. And he's telling us that Rodgers a good player, but moving 80 spots in the draft when you have a team interested in him for a guy that's only going to be on the roster for 8 more games. Now, what is it now? Is it still 8 more games? They're going to get that value.
I don't think they moved 80 spots in the draft. I think what he said, and it's a good point because I didn't know this, and I haven't seen anyone bring this up. They didn't have a 5th rounder at the time of the Roger McCreary trade. So what he's referring to was they were scheduled to have an 80 pick gap between their 4th round pick and then their next pick. I don't think it's possible. I don't think they moved 80 picks in the McCreary deal because it was a 6 for 5th swap, right? I don't think that's going to be 80 picks. So they were scheduled to have an 80 pick gap in between one of their picks and the next scheduled pick before the McCreary trade. Unless I'm doing the math wrong, I had done the math on that they are going to move somewhere between probably 30 to 45 spots will improve the 6th to the 5th swap. But the point is, you're no longer dealing with an 80 pick gap by making that move, and you're improving that pick by somewhere between, it's going to be about 30 to 45 picks. So
depending on the how many comp picks get handed out. And also
correct.
they went through a gap like that last year, and they made trades. They traded down from the top of the second round because they had a similar gap from the second to the fourth round.
Right, exactly.
And they acquired that third round pick. So they didn't want, like, they already just showed you last year, we don't like having that big of a gap.
No
We're
one
going to
does.
maneuver.
That's a lot of good prospects you see fly off the board, right? In between that gap. So for me, it's, I think, and by the way, he's really in tune with the fan base and the comments on Twitter.
Yes.
Because I love that he said it's got nothing to do with the fact that I didn't draft Roger. Like, no doubt he has seen that narrative out there, which I found pretty funny. And I
Borgonzi
believe he
is
well liked in that room.
Borgonzi is online. I freaking love that. That is so funny to me. But yeah, I mean, Roger McCreary is a good teammate. I think that one had nothing to do with the culture fit or whatever. It was purely about, we don't plan on re-signing this player because at this stage of our rebuild, we're not going to spend that much money on a nickel cornerback. And he also mentioned, when you make a move like that, part of draft and develop is that you have players ready to step in. The other part of the speculation that we were sharing on this podcast is that they believe they have a player that's going to take Roger McCreary's role. And that player is Marcus Harris. And we're going to have, next week, I told you, I'm going to give you guys my film review thoughts on Marcus Harris after watching the All-22, because I think, and we might just turn that into a whole mid-season, bye-week rookie class, like, where are we at evaluation, and go through each guy player by player. That might be more interesting than just a Marcus Harris, Kevin Winston episode, Justin. So stay tuned for that next week. If you're subscribed to the channel, if you like the videos, if you drop comments below, you will know, if you're subscribed and have notifications on, when that podcast comes out. Borgonzi went on after McCreary to talk about why he traded Draymond Jones. And this was interesting because they weren't necessarily looking to move Draymond.
We weren't looking to move on from Draymond right now. But we also have to think about the future of this program and where we're at. And, we had a chance to acquire a pick that from Baltimore that, could be a high pick in the 5th and potentially could turn into a 4th round pick. So let's hope the Ravens go to the playoffs and Draymond has 2 more sacks and we can get a 4th round pick out of it.
He's just like all of us. We're all going to root for the Ravens for the rest of the season to finish turning their season around now that Lamar Jackson is healthy and get in the playoffs. And Draymond Jones, go get 2 sacks, buddy. Come on, help out your guys who are still in Nashville. All the friends you made, all the teammates you left behind, help them out by grabbing 2 sacks the rest of the season and get the Titans a 4th round pick.
You'll notice Borgonzi said there an opportunity to acquire a pick. It wasn't a pick swap like the McCreary and Brownlee deal. So, and I think it was on the OTP you talked about. He said that draft capital is essentially the most precious asset we have as NFL general manager.
Another John Robinson-ism. Like, there are a lot of philosophical similarities, I feel like, when it comes to team building, valuing draft picks, and building collecting a roster that are similar to what J-Rob preached.
And all GMs feel the same way. You don't believe me? Look no further than the New York Jets, who accepted 2 first-round picks for a superstar cornerback that they didn't plan on trading, right? Like, it was a can't-refuse sort of offer they got. Teams love draft picks. I mean, listen, when you're a rebuilding team and you sign a free agent to a 1-year deal and you've got the opportunity to trade that player for a draft pick, that's just great business. That's just like, yeah. I see this in the NHL all the time. I'm an NHL fan. Like, a team like the Chicago Blackhawks, who were rebuilding for the longest time, would go into free agency, sign these guys with the foresight that I might probably going to be able to flip this guy for a pick at the deadline because we're going to suck and he's going to be able to help a contender. It's just great team building strategy. It is. It's a shrewd piece of business. And that's how we'll look back on the Draymond Jones deal. I don't want to, not that it's off topic, but when they hired Mike Borgonzi, weeks, maybe a month after that, I had a source inside that building, inside that Titans building, tell me how refreshing it was to have him in there, and went on to say to me, and I quote, "It feels like the good old days of having John Robinson back here again." they were in that building for John Robinson, Rand Carthon, Mike, like you name it. Okay. So to me, it's so interesting to hear you without that knowledge. I don't think I've ever told you that I had that conversation. To make the comparisons to John Robinson. And you can dislike John Robinson all you want for the end of his tenure, but he inherited a terrible football team and turned them into a contender before he had a couple bad off seasons and ruined it again. But the point is, they're at the 2016 stage of John Robinson, right? Worst roster in the NFL. And those roster building philosophies helped turn that team around into a serious contender. So I don't take it as a negative trait that Mike Borgonzi is maybe drawing some comparisons from a philosophy building perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that he's absolutely right, and you're absolutely right. And the Titans are better off with that draft pick than they would have been with 8 more games of Draymond Jones. Now, the argument, should they have re-signed? They have a weak edge spot. Could they have re-signed Draymond? Is he a player that could have been a building block for the future? Well, obviously, they didn't view him that way, even as much as they liked him, or else they would have valued potentially a proven player over a mid-round pick. But they didn't go that way. And then the next answer that we're going to play here is actually the player or the trade that Borgonzi spoke about first. And he gets into this answer about Jarvis Brownlee Jr. He actually starts it by talking about the team culture and then sort of transitions mid-answer into how Jarvis Brownlee Jr. didn't exactly fit into their team culture.
With players, it might be talent, it might be scheme fit, it might be culture fit. Word culture gets thrown around there a lot. So what do you mean by that? Well, it's the habits that we want to have with our players to create a winning culture here. It's the team first mentality. It's the accountability piece. It's the attention to detail piece. It's their willingness to work and get better every day. So that's what we're looking for when we're evaluating these players. And I know the first trade we made with Jarvis Brownlee was I'm aware of it. It was controversial around here because he's a young player that was ascending, and you're evaluating the fit. And without getting into a lot of details, I like Jarvis, and I think he's going to be a really good player in this league. We don't have the culture right now sometimes to help guys develop right now. And, we thought at the time, just some of the habits weren't conducive to building the culture right now. And I know it's hard to understand because he was a young player, and I wish Jarvis nothing but the best.
This is a very interesting answer to me. This might be the most interesting answer he gave. And there are Jets beat writers who sort of took this quote tweeted it on Twitter and said things like, "This is such a strange answer. Glad the Jets were able to take advantage of this GM making these," like somebody tagged me and said, "I need at Titans Film Room's thoughts on these wild comments." And I replied to that person like, what's wild about these comments? This is everything that was reported and speculated on at the time of the trade, now just confirmed by Mike Borgonzi. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., we're all well aware of it as Titans fans. And, fans, we have a habit to sort of start spinning things in our head, some of us, not all of us, when after a player has been moved on from that sort of justify, well, let's try to understand why this happened so we can continue to feel good about our team. It's sort of like a way to make ourselves feel better. But some of this stuff is true. I mean, Jarvis Brownlee tried to fight a fan 3 months ago during training camp. He talked about cold weather being an excuse for why they didn't play well. He was asked earlier in his career and after week 1 about committing so many penalties and showed no accountability and no desire to be better. It didn't even say like, I didn't think I was committing penalties, but the refs are going to call what they're going to call. It was more like man, screw it. Like, these guys are wrong and I'm right. Like, the accountability factor, I think, is a huge personality trait that Mike Borgonzi wants the young building blocks of this franchise to have. Because that, like you said, when guys enter the locker room and that is just the way everyone is, it sets a standard and it sets an expectation for how you entering this locker room also need to act. And Jarvis Brownlee didn't act that way. And I don't think Borgonzi wanted to say anything bad about Brownlee. So it's sort of a weird, confusing answer because he's not going to go badmouth the player publicly to the media after trading him.
No, like I didn't. I'm not saying he might as well, but I'm not confused by his answer. I think clear as day that Jarvis Brownlee he said probably more than he wanted to, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I thought the answer was clear as day that Jarvis Brownlee's not a good fit for the culture, right?
But he also said Brownlee's a good young ascending player, and I like him. Of course, those are sort of the things he has to say. You have to read between the lines a little bit and take out the things that are like he has to say the stock part of the answer, and then he's injecting it with truth that we are seeing. Like, we understand, you and I at least understand why Jarvis Brownlee Jr. was traded. They're trying to create something in this locker room, and Jarvis Brownlee Jr. did not contribute to it, and they haven't reached a point where when players enter the building, they understand there is a standard, there is an expectation, right. And when you haven't reached that point yet, and you have guys who are going counter to that culture, you have to get rid of them. And the fact that they were able to move up in the draft while moving off of a player they don't believe is conducive to building that culture is a win-win for the team.
A 7-6 swap is probably going to do nothing for them, but but what you and I said earlier, right? Like, in terms of the habits that Cam Ward, Chimere Dike, the rookie class are building to set a standard. They obviously felt like not only was Jarvis Brownlee not positively contributing to that, but he might be setting a negative standard for others who come into that room. I tried to invite conversation with some of those Jets beats writers, not in an argumentative sort of way, because the football nerd in me, what's the most interesting thing to me here about this is the Jets are also losing a lot, right? So why did they feel differently about the player and bringing him in? There are only two possible answers to that question. Number one, they do not share that same belief as the Titans, and they don't have to, right? And I'm not saying for sure they don't. It's one of the possibilities again. They do not share that belief that, well, we're losing, we can't bring in these types of players. I think the more likely answer is door number two that I tried explaining on Twitter, because you'd be surprised. I think this is almost a collective thing around there. I had a scouting assistant reply to me on Twitter who follows me, who's, I believe, currently employed in the NFL scouting. He has worked for big-time college programs. He said, bingo, when you are not winning, you can't bring these guys in. It's why you see organizations like the Ravens and the Chiefs bring in these risky players because they know there's a standard in their room. I think the Jets feel the same way. So what makes it different? It's the general manager who made this decision to acquire Jarvis Brownlee, hired the head coach who's in place right now. One who I don't have to know a lot about Aaron Glenn to know that he's a tough-nosed SOB former player who's building culture, right? Like, there's accountability in that room. And the GM believes in that because he's the one who hired him. Mike Borgonzi, rightfully so, did not have that same faith in the head coach who was in the room. This might sound harsh. I had no faith in Brian Callahan's ability as a natural-born leader, a leader of men. He's not that guy. And when you are not the GM who hired him, and you've seen they've done nothing but lose before you got here, and they're losing now, he had no faith that he had the appropriate coach in that room to correct any issues. The Jets have that confidence in Aaron Glenn, as they should. And it's a bit of a risk, right? But again, he hired the head coach, the GM who traded for him. Then I had a Jets fan, a content creator I know well, say to me, so they chose the coach over the player to only fire the coach? No, that's not what happened, because they know they can't get the culture, the coaching-driven culture moving in the direction until, you can't even say January when they hire the next one, because not only you got to wait till January to hire them, you then have to wait. It doesn't happen overnight. Right? It doesn't happen overnight for the next coach to build that culture. In the meantime, you were going to keep this guy who you believe would be going against the culture you're trying to establish and the new patterns and habits the next head coach wants to see instilled, which moves in the drumline with what Cam Ward and these culture builders you believe are doing. So for me, it's not about that both teams are losing. It's a very different situation from a culture and coaching perspective on the Jets side. Very different. So I'm trying not to sound like I guess it does sound like I've totally accepted this move. I'm still going to be monitoring how Jarvis Brownlee plays there and yada yada and all that, and we can revisit, though it's hard. I deserve it. It's hard to revisit because I think the culture fit is so different.
That's my thing. Like, to me, and maybe I got two-tone tinted glasses on and I'm just drinking up the Kool-Aid that Mike Borgonzi is spilling. First of all, I really do believe Mike Borgonzi is going to prove himself to be a good general manager and lead this rebuild, the way we titled this episode for a reason. Not as clickbaity as yesterday's title, I don't think, Justin. This one we actually do believe. And I think that this is the way that you have to build a culture. And it doesn't matter to me how good Jarvis Brownlee becomes or is in 3 years. And yeah, you can say moving on from a good player is never good business, but it's not as simple as that. It goes back to the right 53 versus the best collection of talent. This stuff matters to winning. It really does. Is that you can't just have these players who are going to set bad examples for other young guys coming in. I think that is really underrated when it comes to us as a fan experience. A lot of fans played Madden growing up. And so to a lot of fans, constructing a team is like doing it in Madden. You just get all the talent you can. It doesn't matter how the personalities fit together, how the scheme fits come together. And, because that was part of Borgonzi's opening remarks, and that was a long answer as part of his long opening remarks, when he finally did open the floor to questions, one of the first questions was about the habits that he's talking about wanting to have be, created in this locker room and why Brownlee didn't fit. And this is the second answer Borgonzi gave on the Brownlee trade.
Well, I think I touched on just the accountability piece, attention to detail, the willingness to get better every day. And so I don't want to specifically, touch on that because Jarvis is a great kid and I wish nothing but success for him.
And to be clear, he wasn't specifically talking necessarily about Jarvis Brownlee, but he made sure to say that he wasn't. And the question, the way it was asked was not necessarily about Jarvis, but in terms of those habits you want to see built, what are they and what was missing with Brownlee? And again, he's not intentionally specifically talking about Jarvis Brownlee when it comes to accountability, attention to detail, and, working every day to get better. But all three of those things apply to Jarvis Brownlee Jr. as things that he did not bring to the table. We already talked about the accountability factor. Attention to detail, like committing a holding penalty as a secondary player, is about attention to detail. If you put your hand in the right spot when you're jamming a receiver versus putting it too far outside or somewhere else, that's literally the definition of attention to detail. And then that willingness to get better and want to get better every day is about, Brownlee's given answers to media about how he doesn't see an area that he needs to improve when it comes to penalties or whatever. He thinks he's doing everything the right way. Those are all things that do apply to Jarvis Brownlee, even if Borgonzi was saying this is just a general answer. I'm not talking about Brownlee. He's a good kid, So I think this is a telling answer, and I think these are things to keep in mind, at least for the next year or two, when you and I and anyone in Titans media or fans talk about or think about what players they're going to target. Until they have this established culture, we kind of know all the guys that they bring in are going to look like the guys in last year's rookie class. Let's get to, I have two more sound clips that I'm going to play here, and then we're going to talk, just you and I, about a few of the other answers Borgonzi gave. But one that I thought was really interesting is he wasn't asked directly about Jeffery Simmons. He brought Jeffery Simmons up on his own when talking about positive things and growth that he's seen in the team and things that have been positive despite this season of losing and negativity. And he mentioned Jeffery Simmons.
I want to highlight Jeff Simmons. Jeff has been tremendous. Jeff was a player that came in this league and they were winning, and he's gone through some losing seasons here right now. And I communicate with Jeff a lot, and Jeff is a big part of why we're going to turn this thing around here. He is. He's one of the better players in the league, and his leadership with these young guys has been tremendous.
And we know all those things about Jeffery Simmons, but it's nice to hear the general manager of the team reaffirm them. It's interesting to me that he mentions that he speaks to Jeff regularly, probably hey, big fella, don't worry. I'm working on it. I'm going to get you back on a winning team. Don't worry. Just give me a season or two and help me turn this thing around and be the leader that I know you are. And he was also asked, Borgonzi, after giving this answer, he talked about trading Draymond Jones and how they weren't necessarily looking to move Draymond Jones, but the value was there. And he was asked, like, doesn't that same logic apply to Jeffery Simmons? Like, you may not be looking to move a guy, you may love a guy, but he's a guy that can bring you draft picks that no one else on the roster could bring you if they were available for trade. And here is his answer on basically why they did not trade Jeffery Simmons.
Well, you have to weigh those options, and you say it's a business, but like when you weigh those options, you look at it and you say, what do we have here? And he's a pillar here in this organization for what you want, and he's one of the best players in the league in his position, and the way he works every day at practice, I don't know if I've seen a defensive lineman superstar like him, just empty the tank every day at practice. It's impressive. And when your best player does that and younger guys look to him, that's what you want. That's what I'm talking about being a standard.
He is the standard. He sets the standard. He is the standard. He is the example. There was another answer I didn't play. Borgonzi talked earlier in the press conference about, when he was in Kansas City and the culture that they had there and the other players on the Chiefs team seeing Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, the leaders of the team and the best players on the team, work their tail off in practice every single day, and how that inspires everyone else and shows everyone else what the standard is. And to him, Jeffery Simmons is that guy for this team, along with the rookie class that, they can't really be that example yet because of their status in the league. But Jeffery Simmons can be, and he's more valuable to them on this team than a first and a third or whatever draft compensation you think he would be worth.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this simple because I think it's obvious how much Mike Borgonzi loves and appreciates Jeffery Simmons, right? He sees him as one of those few long-term building blocks on this roster. They're probably going to sign him to a new contract this coming offseason because there's no guaranteed money left on his deal, and Simmons will not be pleased with the state of the contract. So I think Borgonzi's telling you straight up how they feel about him. And, never say never, but what this answer tells me is the only way they trade Jeffery Simmons is if they get that 2 first-round picks, right? Like that offer you can't refuse, because I'd be shocked if someone wasn't willing to offer up the Quinnen Williams package, like a first and a second or a first and a third at worst. And Borgonzi's answer kind of tells me that's not enough because they've probably gotten that offer in loose conversation. So for me, it's Sauce Gardner territory. Jeffery Simmons is going to be here unless a team offers us like 2 first-round picks, something we just absolutely can't say no to. So they're going to keep building forward with Jeffery. I mean, they love him. And like John Robinson drafted him, loved him. Mike Vrabel loved him. Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan loved him. They routinely praised Jeffery Simmons in a similar light. And now you get Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker. They all say the same thing. So it's all around been a love fest for Jeffery Simmons since he's gotten here. And I would anticipate that he's going to be here for a couple more years.
Yeah, 100%. I think they really view him as like one of the key players that's going to help lead this turnaround. And let's get into a few of the other answers that Borgonzi gave here, because there were a few interesting ones. He was asked about Chad Brinker, and I thought this was a good question. I think it was Jared Stillman who asked this question. That was like, why should the fans trust Chad Brinker and the way that you and Chad Brinker work together? Like, we haven't seen any evidence that we should trust this yet, right? And he went on to say, like, Chad Brinker's been very valuable to him in terms of the role that he does, being like a cap strategic expert in that area, while also having that scouting background that he can bring, scouting opinions and suggestions to the table. But I feel like Borgonzi also made it very clear in that answer that he has the roster control. And he went on a long rant about, you can call our job titles different titles, but the way that this organization is set up, is structured, is the same as every organization I've ever seen. You have the general manager who's in charge of the roster. You have he called him a VP, or it doesn't matter what his title is, but usually like a VP executive who's in charge of cap and strategy and helps with trades and all that stuff. And you have a head coach, and those are the 3 people that lead a football team, and they do it together. They collaborate. He went on to say, like, I'm not going to go rogue and just make a draft pick. Talked about the huge staff that they have in the executive office, the Dave Zieglers and the Reggie McKenzies and all those other guys that they brought in this offseason to build a brain trust in there. and that they all work together and they constantly collaborate and communicate and talk about what moves they want to make. Yet, like, this idea that there's one person in the building like pulling the strings, or that they're not all working together in some capacity, is just crazy. Like, I don't understand where fans come up with this. And I feel like we go through this every time there's a regime change in Tennessee, and especially every time that new regime is struggling on the field. It's like, oh, it's Malarkey versus Robinson, or it's Vrabel versus Robinson, or it's Carthon versus Vrabel, or it's Chad Brinker versus Mike Borgonzi versus Brian Callahan, or whatever. And I do think, to be fair, there was some element of friction
some of that
between
Amy's fault, right? Because like Robinson and Malarkey were not
on the same
aligned.
timeline.
Vrabel and Carthon were not aligned. It's these half measures that have led to that, right?
But I think there's a lot more truth to friction between Vrabel and Carthon than any of the other pairings that we mentioned there, though.
Oh, Robinson and Malarkey hated each other. I mean, they had Robinson did not want to continue with Malarkey. I got that on pretty good account.
Okay, well, that's an interesting assessment.
I mean, he convinced Amy to fire him after they won a playoff game, right?
Like, yeah, but they worked together a little bit, I guess, when Robinson agreed to take the job, essentially. Knowing
you're trying to get your first GM job in the National Football League. I think
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, they definitely collaborated for a time, even if Robinson was always eyeing his next guy there. And Robinson and Vrabel certainly worked together up until probably the moment that A.J. Brown was traded, and then it became an untenable relationship. But my point is, there is always, in every front office, there is always collaboration like this. Nobody's just making decisions unilaterally. They're discussing, and Borgonzi probably brings a plan to Brinker, and Brinker gives his input on the plan, and then Borgonzi goes and executes the plan, and along with all the other guys in the room. They're all giving input, right? So I thought that was an interesting answer and a good answer, and he said he revealed his onlineness yet again when answering that, because he's like, I know that people, don't necessarily trust us, and I know that sometimes this is confusing to fans, but like, he's just sharing these little hints that he understands what the fans are saying online.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to say I'm on the fence about Chad Brinker, because I do think the narrative has been overly negative. I mean, certainly, he's been here for a couple of the mistakes, right? Like the Rand Carthon aimless spending spree that's gone so terribly. I don't think he played a big role in it, but probably maybe should have done more. It's funny, you don't want him to meddle, but maybe he should have meddled a little bit in that one. And then he was certainly imperative to the Brian Callahan hiring. He was in that room and had a voice in that decision that went so terribly. But I also think he's kind of become like a blindless scapegoat, if you will, right? Like it's all Chad Brinker's fault. I don't think it's all Chad Brinker's fault. I think the biggest thing that this answer did for me, and it gave me a lot of confidence, is that as much as they collaborate, Mike Borgonzi is the one with roster control. He is the one making these decisions, even if there's collaboration with the draft picks, free agency, and all that. And that gives me confidence. That makes me feel good, because I believe that Mike Borgonzi should be the one making these decisions. When they went through the hiring process, I said on multiple episodes of this show that he was my favorite candidate. I think he had the most impressive resume of any of the GM candidates. And I largely like what he's done so far. I mean, free agency was a mixed bag, certainly, but I put a lot more stock into what they did during the NFL draft, because they didn't go on some crazy spending spree in free agency for the most part, right? They tried to plug holes with temporary solutions. You kind of expect mixed results when that's the case. The Draymond Joneses, the Cody Bartons, the Xavier Woods. The one you could, if you want to put the Dan Moore one, you could talk about more extensively, because it's an $82 million contract. But for the most part, I think Mike Borgonzi's off to a great start, and it gives me terrific confidence that he is the one with roster control.
And he talked a little about the free agency plan, and talked about how, because they have a lot of cap space, and was asked what he was going to do with it, and talked about how like they are going to be frugal with their money in free agency, and they are going to make smart strategic signings, but that if there is a player or a position of need that they need to target aggressively, they will do that when they need to. And we saw them do that with Dan Moore, and I believe we're going to see them do that at either cornerback or edge. I could see either of those. Depends on who actually ends up hitting the market. But I could see them being aggressive at one spot, just like they did this past offseason, and then Band-Aid over the rest where they need to plug depth or just plug a hole for a season or two while they try to draft and develop a player to come in and take that role in a more full-time basis. So thought that answer was also interesting. And then he was asked about the head coaching search, and he said he didn't think now was the appropriate time to really get into the head coaching search. But he did talk about the fact that, he's going to be leading the search for a head coach alongside Chad Brinker and the rest of the guys that we keep mentioning in that room, but that it is ultimately, he's going to have not necessarily final say, but a large role in choosing who that head coach is going to be. And did also mention a little bit in the type of person that they're looking for. He said it doesn't matter if it's offensive or defensive minded. What we're looking for is a leader of men. Cue the John Robinism yet again, Justin. That's exactly what John Robinson said ahead of the Titans going out and hiring Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to say on this one because it's so early in the search. Can we draw from his answer that he's, leading the charge, that maybe the candidate that gets hired is going to be one that has a direct connection to him? We can't say that with any sense of certainty. But I mean, if you think for sure it was going to be Mike McCarthy, let's be honest, a lot of the Mike McCarthy rumors came from the fact that he's got a relationship with Chad Brinker. They were together in Green Bay. I'm not saying this is the case, but maybe we need to focus more on a Matt Nagy or a Mike Kafka, like the guys that we've talked about who were literally with Mike Borgonzi in Kansas City. I don't think, though, he's not going to have tunnel vision. I don't think he's only going to focus on guys that he has relationships with. That's why I don't want to spend a ton of time on this topic, because it's so early and we're kind of guessing a little bit. And we've done quite a few coaching episodes in recent weeks, but for me, again, he's the general manager. He should be the one sort of in control of not only the roster, but also of the coaching search. So I feel good about sort of the power that he's got in this thing.
Yeah, and honestly, that answer made me think of Robert Saleh a little bit more, a guy who is a leader of men, who offensive or defensive doesn't matter as much as who this person is and their character and their ability to lead a team, which I fully agree with. And again, it's going to be on Robert Saleh to decide if this is the organization he wants to tie his last chance at a head coaching job, most likely to. And I don't know, Mike Borgonzi might give him the confidence that they can build something together, and that Amy's not really a distraction. Amy's here, but she's not a distraction. She's not that involved. And Borgonzi does seem to have a long enough leash that Amy's going to be patient with him based on what he's saying. And, the actions that he's taken are not like an attempt to be competitive immediately for the sake of saving your job because you don't have a lot of time to do so. It's like, we're building this thing the right way, and it might take an extra season to get there, but once we get there, you'll see the benefits of it. I want to close this thing out, Justin, by just talking about Mike Borgonzi's background a little bit more. Obviously, we went through it in depth when he was hired, but it's been a long time since we touched on some of this stuff. And just tying this back to the title of the episode, that Mike Borgonzi will rebuild the Titans into a contender. Mike Borgonzi was hired in Kansas City in 2009. They were not a super competitive football team at the time. Borgonzi went through a few seasons of average to below average level play from this team. And they bottomed out hardcore in 2012 when they went 2-14. That, if we're drawing parallels, is the season the Titans are having right now. I believe it was that offseason, correct me if I'm wrong, that they brought in Alex Smith, potentially, a real quarterback.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe.
They also hired John Dorsey as the general manager and Andy Reid as the head coach. And now Borgonzi wasn't necessarily involved in those hiring processes. Obviously, he was like a low-level scout assistant. Maybe I can't remember exactly where he was by the time it was 2013. That was his fourth year in Kansas City. But they go hire these new guys. And if John Dorsey is your Mike Borgonzi and Mike Borgonzi has to go hire his Andy Reid, guess what record the Chiefs had in 2014, the season after getting the number 1 overall pick? They went 11-5. That is a turnaround. One season after going 2-14. Now, that said, I'm not expecting necessarily the Titans to go 11-5 next year. I think that's probably 2 years away, just based on the state of each roster. But if they hire a coach as good as Andy Reid, anything's possible. And if Cam Ward plays as well as Patrick Mahomes under a new coach like Andy Reid, anything's possible. Obviously, that's an exaggeration and a stretch. But my point is, Mike Borgonzi wasn't just with the Chiefs during the good times, where they're constantly going to the playoffs before Mahomes and then going to the AFC Championship every year with Mahomes. Like, he was there when the foundation was laid. And they had a player, Chris Jones, kind of similar to Jeffery Simmons in terms of like a good defensive player who was on a bad team that got good and was Chris Jones was part of the leadership that helped them turn things around there. So he's seen this happen. He's seen this play out. He worked under John Dorsey for a while, and John Dorsey really rebuilt a bad Chiefs team, and it didn't take him that long to do it. And I think that model for potential success is one that Borgonzi is going to look to. And he was there when Andy Reid was hired. He knows what kind of coach they were looking for. He watched Andy Reid operate in that building for years and years and years, like 10 years, 11 years. He watched Andy Reid go about his day-to-day duties as head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs and understands what he's looking for in his next head coach. So all of those things, his background, all the answers he gave, and the actions he's done thus far, the players he's drafted already, like, all of this gives me a pretty fair amount of confidence in Mike Borgonzi to lead this team out of the darkness.
The last thing I'm going to add before we conclude this episode is it's relevant to that point and talks a little more about the dynamic between Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi. A big reason why I do believe in their collaboration and why I think that they continue to get along, it helps when you're collaborating, it helps when you sort of see things the same way or in a similar way, right? Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon did not see things the same way. John Robinson and Mike Mularkey, I know it's a bit of a difference, but probably didn't see things the same way. Well, you talked about John Dorsey being in Kansas City. He was a GM for 5 years while Mike Borgonzi was there. Now, I believe Borgonzi actually got there a little before Dorsey did.
4 years before, yeah.
But he was in a pretty low-level role. I imagine if you asked him today, who was some of his biggest influences in Kansas City?
I'm glad you said that because Taylor Zarzor asked him that on the OTP, and after going through his high school and college coaches, the first person he mentioned was John Dorsey.
Exactly what I expected him to do, right? So Chad Brinker gets hired in Green Bay in 2009 was his first foray into a front office, if you will. I mean, he was a scouting intern, okay? So $20,000 a year, $30,000, whatever he was earning in 2009 as a Green Bay Packers scouting intern, 2009. You want to guess who the Packers director of scouting was? John Dorsey in Green Bay when Chad Brinker was hired in Green Bay. So to me, I think a big part, and then who is John Dorsey's biggest influence? If you look this up, it's Ron Wolf, right? It's what Ron Wolf did with those legendary Packers programs. I don't think the Packers have ever deviated from like the Wolf school of scouting. I believe is one of, layman terms, is one of the terms that they've always believed in, the philosophy they've believed in. Okay, so John Dorsey learns under that in Green Bay. Chad Brinker is there for that. He goes to Kansas City, applies a lot of that system and beliefs to now what Mike Borgonzi is learning under, and the two of them come together now in Tennessee. So I think the shared and similar backgrounds that they had in their formative years of scouting and becoming executives in the NFL, no doubt to me, John Dorsey and sort of the Packers way was really, really imperative to that, to their philosophy. So to me, it's a big reason why I think this Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker partnership can and will work.
Well said, Justin. We have a lot of confidence, and that press conference yesterday gave us even more, I think. I mean, I've been, maybe you can say I've been carrying the water a little bit for the moves that they've made throughout this trading process, and like I was on here defending them trading Brownlee and trading McCreary and trading Draymond Jones, and a lot of people thought at least one or if not more of those moves was a very questionable decision. And I've been on here defending it because I kind of see the vision. Like I understand the process that Mike Borgonzi is undertaking here. And the only thing we can do as fans is trust the process, because if we get impatient and that leads to ownership understanding that the fans are impatient and want to see a change, then if it leads to a change, you just start this whole process over again. And Mike Borgonzi may prove to be a failure, but you kind of just have to ride you hired the guy. You got to take your chance on the guy and swallow the medicine now. And if the medicine works, You'll see the dividends of it. And if the medicine makes you more sick, then you can remedy that once you find out that it has made you more sick. In a couple of, like, you just simply have to give him these years. And if you're wrong to trust him, then so be it. That sucks. That would really suck. But you can't just turn this thing around, because the Titans aren't in a position where they can just like make a few little tweaks and get back to competitive again. Like, the foundation of the team that was competitive under Mike Vrabel is gone. That the only player left is Jeffery Simmons. Like, that team does not exist anymore in Tennessee. So that's
the key. They've got to stay patient now. They've got to stay patient and not pull the plug on Mike Borgonzi too early. I'm honestly fine giving the guy 5 years. That might sound like a long time. 3 is the baseline minimum every GM should get, in my opinion. It should always be 3 at least. But in this situation, when you've been accused of pulling the rug up out of people too early and dysfunction, you've got to try to give this guy, be patient, give him at least 5 years, reassess at that point. But for now, I'm incredibly confident in Mike Borgonzi.
I'm also confident. 5 years does sound like a long time if the team continues to win 2 or 3 games a year. Like, is there a caveat that it's like 5 years, assuming you see those?
This year's not his fault. You know what I mean? Like, this first year, to me, he inherited such a mess. I'm not putting a 2-14, whatever they are this year, 2-15. I'm not putting that on Mike Borgonzi this year. You know
agree.
What I mean?
But in 3 years from now, if this is the record 3 years in a row, then you don't get 5 years. Like, you have to see some improvement over those 5 years.
To me, like, that's an extreme example of it.
Yeah.
And my point is, it should take an extremely negative results to justify firing him before 5 years.
Okay,
it should
fair.
We're still 3-14, and he's been the GM for 4 years. Like, that's what it should take. It should not be, they're 6-11. He hasn't gotten there. 7-10. I'm fired. No, they've got to be as patient as realistically possible with Mike Borgonzi.
There you go. I agree with that, and I think all the Titans fans out there, like, losing breeds negativity, and the Titans have lost a lot in a short amount of time. Like, we forget how close we are to Mike Vrabel getting the number 1 seed with a fully injured team, and then starting the next year 7-3 before they totally fell off a cliff. And it's like, since they fell off that cliff, the Titans have just been so freaking bad that it just creates this aura of negativity around the team and the fan base. And it's hard to remember that, like, they were pretty good not that long ago, and they can get back to that before too long. We just have to be patient. And as the 76ers would say, trust the process. All right, that'll do it for this supersized episode of the Music City Audible podcast. Lots of good stuff that we had to get into there with Mike Borgonzi talking on Wednesday, and I really I wish he would talk more. I like listening to him talk football. Very smart guy, and I love the things that he says about his plan to fix the Titans. And we believe Mike Borgonzi will rebuild the Titans into a contender. So that'll do it. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. If you're not subscribed and you watch this whole show, like, what are you doing? Like, at least we gave you, an hour of content here or so. Like, give us a subscription for that, and as a reward, or as a thank you, I should say. And like the video, drop your comments below. Are you in or out on Mike Borgonzi? If you made it this deep into the podcast, let us know by commenting in or out in the comments below. Thanks again to Sinkers Beverages for supporting the channel. We appreciate all you guys. We'll be back next week getting into the rookie class review, the winning versus losing versus tanking conversation, and anything else that we think of to cover. Justin and I sat down last night and came up with the bye-week topics. So we have something for you every day next week. Until Monday, enjoy a weekend where the Titans will not ruin your Sunday, and we'll be back next time. Stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.